Okay, so there's this phenomenon called the Oz factor that researchers started paying attention to, and it basically describes something that happens in a lot of UFO encounters, where reality just gets switched. The name comes from that one bedtime story you must have read if you had a childhood, called The Wizard of Oz. And if you didn't have a childhood and haven't read it, well, it's about a girl named Dorothy who steps into the land of Oz, basically another dimension, very similar to what happens when you experience the Oz factor. Like, imagine you're in a library studying, right? Completely normal Tuesday afternoon. And some random guy walks up and starts yelling at you about how flying saucers are the most important thing in the world and that you're not taking it seriously enough. And then he leaves and you're like, okay, whatever. That guy was unhinged. But then you try to go back to your work and you notice that the librarian isn't at the front desk anymore. And you look around and there's no one else in the library at all. Which is strange because it's the middle of the day and there should be people everywhere. And you realize there's no sound either. Like, no one's typing on keyboards, no pages turning, no footsteps, no nothing. So you walk around for an hour in this completely silent, completely empty library. And then, when you finally leave, boom, the librarians are back at their desks, and there are people studying and everything's back to normal again. You just lost an hour of your life where the world looked the same, but was fundamentally missing pieces. That's what happened to this one guy named, and bear with me as I try to pronounce his name, Peter M. Rojcewicz, a folklorist who experienced the Oz factor in 1980 while he was in a library working on his Ph.D. dissertation, which was actually about UFOs, ironically enough. That's the Oz factor. And this thing doesn't just happen to humans. In 1976 in Wisconsin, this couple was sleeping in a camper on a farm when a UFO showed up over their property. This dome-shaped thing shooting light into the barn, and the moment it appeared, the wind literally stopped blowing. Every bird and insect and animal noise just vanished. Their German Shepherd, which had been barking, went completely silent and wouldn't move for hours. And there was just nothing but the sound of heavy footsteps walking slowly around their camper all night long. And they sat there with a gun trembling in their hands because they were too terrified to actually look outside and see what was making the footsteps. When sunrise came, the dog suddenly whimpered a few times and started barking again. And then all the regular sounds rushed back in. Birds started chirping, and the thing was gone. But I can't help but to think, why weren't they affected like everything else was? What does that say about us that we're the only thing that stays awake when everything else gets turned off? So, there's this guy named Whitley Strieber who was a horror writer, which is genuinely funny because he's about to have an experience that makes everything he's ever written look like a children's bedtime story. December 26, 1985, he's at his cabin in the Hudson Valley with his wife and kid, and he wakes up in the middle of the night, paralyzed, and I mean completely paralyzed. He can't twitch a finger or even move his eyes or anything really. He's just conscious, nothing more. Then, from the corner of his eye, he notices something. There are 3 small figures standing in his bedroom wearing blue coveralls, about 4 or 5 feet tall, wide faces, these deep-set eyes that just stare. And the first thing your brain does in that situation is try to convince you you're dreaming, which is exactly what Strieber tried to do for maybe like 2 seconds before he realized he's actually awake, and there are actual beings in his actual bedroom. The weird beings lifted him off the mattress using some sort of alien powers or whatever, while he's still completely locked down, floated through the cabin, and he's taken into what he describes as a small circular room with a domed ceiling and these ribs running across it at 1-foot intervals. And then he, let's just say he gets examined in a procedure where let's call it an instrument gets inserted into his butt, which causes him to get a third leg, if you get what I mean. And then, okay, so There's a release that happens, and before I even say this, I'm genuinely uncomfortable saying it, but the fluid comes out of the third leg and gets collected in a small tube by one of the three beings performing this. The taller, more delicate one with massive black eyes that seem to absorb light. So his body is being used for something he has no control over while he's completely conscious and aware of what's happening. When he wakes up the next morning, he remembers almost none of it except for this vivid image of a barn owl staring at him through the window. So he goes to check the window and there's nothing there. No owl, not even any tracks in the snow, nothing. And that's when you start wondering, how many times has this happened to him that he has absolutely zero memory of? So, there's this Brazilian farmer named Antônia Vilas-Boas who, in October 1957, decides the best time to work on his fields is at night because it's cooler. And that's the kind of decision that puts you in the wrong place at exactly the wrong time. October 16th, he's plowing around midnight near São Francisco de Sales when he sees what he thinks is a red star in the sky. Except this star starts moving toward him, growing bigger and bigger until it becomes this roughly circular, egg-shaped thing with a red light in front and a rotating cupola on top. And it's descending, extending three metal legs like it's about to land right on top of his field. So Vilas-Boas does what any rational person would do and tries to run, gets back to his tractor, but the moment he fires it up, the engine dies and the lights cut out after traveling maybe 100 feet. So he abandons it and bolts on foot, which is when he gets grabbed by this 5-foot-tall humanoid wearing gray coveralls and a helmet, small blue eyes, making these barking and yelping sounds instead of talking. And then 3 more of these gray guys show up, and they're dragging him back to the ship. Once he's inside, they strip him completely naked and coat him from head to toe in this strange gel that smells and feels like nothing he's ever experienced. Then they take him to the semicircular room where they draw blood from his chin of all places with what looks like some kind of needle. And then they throw him alone into another room and start pumping gas inside until he's violently ill, throwing up, all that. Now, after he's been poisoned and weakened and broken down physically, that's when a female shows up. And she's naked, attractive in an alien way, same height as the others, but with a small pointed chin and these large blue cat-like eyes. And her hair is long and white, like platinum blonde, except her underarm and pubic hair are bright red, which is such a specific detail that you know he's telling you exactly what he saw. And then she does what she's apparently there to do, and they, get freaky, if you get what I mean. Except she doesn't kiss him. She nips him on the chin instead, and when it's over, she smiles at him and rubs her belly and gestures upward, and Vilas-Boas suddenly understands. She's going to have his child somewhere up there in space. She seems to be relieved it's over. But he's furious because he just realized he was used like livestock. And if you remember, he was a farmer himself. He spent his entire life understanding animal husbandry, knowing exactly what it meant to breed cattle and horses, knowing the purpose, the process, the coldness of it. And then he became the animal on the other end of it. So he stuck with this story for the rest of his life, ditched farming to become a lawyer, had 4 children of his own, never changed a single detail. And he probably understood his livestock a whole lot differently after that night, because now he knew what they felt. Okay, so there's this ranch in northeastern Utah that's basically got its own zip code in hell. And when you visit it, there's a really good chance you're bringing something home with you that you absolutely didn't pack. The problem is, once it gets attached to you, it doesn't just stay in your house, it spreads. In July 2009, a naval intelligence officer named Jonathan Axelrod who had top-secret clearance, the kind of guy who knew things about classified military programs that would make your brain melt, decided to visit Skinwalker Ranch as part of a government investigation called AAWSAP, which is the Pentagon's secret $22 million UFO program that nobody knew existed until 2017, when the New York Times basically said, "Hey, remember that thing?" So Axelrod shows up with a Marine named Jim Costigan and another guy named David Wilson, and while they're on the property, something happens. Something bad enough to terrify all three of them so much that none of them have ever spoken about it. And then Axelrod goes home to Virginia. Within weeks, his entire household is experiencing a full paranormal invasion. His wife starts seeing these shapeshifter things, wolf-like creatures with wrong proportions standing in the backyard, staring into the house. His teenage son Paul is getting attacked by colored orbs, blue and red ones, floating through his bedroom at night. Another teenager's walking black shadow people standing over family members' beds when they wake up. And there's this constant sound of heavy footsteps walking up and down the stairs at all hours, except nobody's on the stairs. And then Paul's friends, kids from school who had zero exposure to Axelrod's nightmare and zero knowledge of what was happening in his home, start calling him independently. One kid says, "Hey, Paul, I saw this massive wolf thing at my bedroom window last night." Another says, "Dude, blue lights were flying around my backyard." These kids don't know each other's stories. The thing that followed Axelrod home from the ranch that day didn't stay in Axelrod's house. It spread like a virus. And the health stuff gets so messed up. Like, Axelrod's wife starts getting lupus flare-ups out of nowhere. Both the teenagers are getting slammed with this gnarly flu that shows up right after the weird stuff starts happening. And then Costigan's wife, she just gets touched by a blue orb in Maryland and suddenly gets sick with Hashimoto's, which is basically where your body just starts attacking your own thyroid because it's confused as hell. But here's the crazy part. Even his DIA official's brother, who lived in North Carolina and had literally never dealt with any paranormal stuff ever, is suddenly getting followed by these massive orange UFOs just hovering outside his house at night. His dog disappears through locked doors and comes back the next morning just completely freaked out, whimpering outside. It's like, it doesn't matter if you've never experienced any of this before. The thing just finds you anyway. So, the Pentagon had this program, right? Studying UFOs and paranormal phenomena. 50 PhDs and military intelligence officers. A 115-document database that the government still hasn't released. And what they discovered is that you can't just visit places where reality doesn't work right and expect to come home unchanged. Whatever's at that ranch, whatever exists in those fields and that sky, it follows, it attaches, and it brings friends. The government called it the Hitchhiker effect, and it's the reason that 5 different DIA personnel who visited the ranch all came home with something that wasn't there before. And maybe the scariest part isn't that it happened, it's that after decades of investigation, after millions of dollars, after 115 detailed reports, the government still doesn't know how to stop it from spreading. So, there's this couple, Betty and Barney Hill, driving through New Hampshire on September 19th, 1961, and they see this light following their car that doesn't behave like a plane or satellite because it's zigging and zagging and basically playing tag with them on this empty mountain road. And Barney's smart enough to know that something's wrong, so he pulls over, sees what he thinks are beings inside this craft watching him, runs back screaming that they're about to get captured, and then nothing. 2 hours just vanish. They wake up 35 miles away with no memory of what happened, and both of them feel fundamentally wrong. like something had been done to them that their brains couldn't process yet. 2 years later, they go to a psychiatrist named Benjamin Simon, who specializes in hypnosis, and suddenly, under hypnosis, Betty starts describing medical examinations, gray beings with massive eyes poking her with needles, a pregnancy test that involved a needle 6 inches long shoved into her abdomen. And Barney's describing the same thing, except the aliens looked like Hitler to him because, and I'm not making this up, his brain decided to filter an unknowable extraterrestrial threat through the lens of the worst thing he could imagine from history. Their story went public in 1965, and suddenly, every single alien encounter report that followed looked exactly like theirs. Gray beings, medical exams, missing time. But I wonder, how many people have to report the exact same thing before it stops being coincidence and becomes something you can't explain away?